What's up, guys? Travis and John here with an intro to our newest episode of Elbows Tight Podcast with none other than Mr. Roy Dean himself. John, how was that, bro?
I'm still a little shell-shocked. I feel like I was kind of like a little shell-shocked even doing it.
Yeah.
Like I was trying to look at him. I was like, don't look him in the eye. No, I can look him in the eye. Like, this is all right.
Yeah, I was like, I can't believe this is actually going on. We actually have our whiteboard of like questions behind the camera because John was supposed to ask some.
I couldn't read it.
I could barely read it too. I was like trying not to like read the whiteboard and be as professional as possible like, and look at the What made you decide? Okay, that's my next question. Yeah. And then like I was trying to like Jason Kalipa talked about how being in the moment and sticking with it in the moment. I was like, I cannot look away.
he put out so much like good information that I'm gonna have to listen to it a couple times probably to really.
It was amazing. The amount of knowledge this guy has about jiu-jitsu, and not only just jiu-jitsu, but Japanese Jujutsu, Aikido, and it's phenomenal. And he really brings like a different aspect of, I guess you could say, knowledge. I don't want to keep using the word knowledge, but when it comes to martial arts, with his extensive background in it, he has been doing it since he was 16 years old, and he's 46 now. So 30 years of some sort of martial arts training, and it's just he has different point of views about it, and he can see things for what they really are. It's not like he's like, oh man, this is the best.
Well, I mean, and he's done it in different ways. Like,
yeah,
I don't know anyone else that went and lived in a dojo.
Yeah, he lived in Japan
country for what I mean, like learning it like that. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, he went to public schools in Japan. It's not like he was a military brat and then he went to school on base or something like that. But he was actually in a foreign exchange student program in Japan, and they told him in order for him to really get immersed in the culture that he should pick up an after-school program, a traditional Japanese program. So he picked up judo, and that was his first kind of thing to that exposed him to the Japanese culture was judo. And, it kind of just was like a trajectory from there to just opening up to other different martial arts. And it's such a good episode. Unfortunately, we have, oh my God.
Well, I mean,
so many.
One of the biggest guys we get on the podcast, and it's just the one day we started having issues.
Dude, like camera, like you guys will see, I completely forgot to press record on the first, like the intro with him. Luckily, nothing really was said yet that the video was going to be needed, but the first couple minutes is going to be just pure audio for you guys. If you're watching it on YouTube, if you're listening to it on your favorite podcast thing, then you won't even be able to tell the difference. But yeah, the camera shut off a couple times on us. It was overheating. The SD card on the recorder freaking stopped working. Luckily, we got the audio to sound good on the Zoom, so we can use the audio on Zoom. It doesn't really matter, you guys. You guys won't tell the difference. But behind the scenes, I was like, I can't believe this is happening.
Not today.
Not today.
Felt like we were belt testing. And,
oh
we
my
just
God,
weren't showing our
man.
best.
It was bad. It was so bad. But luckily, the interview still went on. Mr. Roy Dean was very professional and completely understood. He's been there, done that. And, he obviously makes high-quality content as well. So he understands that sometimes things just happen. It's how you react to them, and I just try to fix it as fast as possible in whichever way I can. So
let's talk about this beverage of the day.
Beverage of the day.
I can't wait to talk about mine.
This is delicious. I got the what is it, John? What's the alcohol percentage?
None. It's pretty cold today too. I could have used a nice drink. But
what do we have?
We got Vita Coco coconut water. Travis was nice enough to get me a non-flavored one.
I got the pressed coconut and pineapple.
I got to say, as far as the original taste on this, I'm not the biggest fan.
Yep.
But it's got a lot of potassium.
Yeah. Yeah. The reason we chose this is, one, John and I have to head into town after this, and it's been snowing nonstop for, I don't know, almost a day. So I was like, oh, we could have a beer, but I was like, I gotta go drive. I don't really want to do that.
We'll share a couple pictures of what the outside looked like.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. You look at the Instagram; it'll be on the story on the Instagram. But yeah, it's like heavily snowed outside right now. So Mr. Dean was talking about his beverage was going to be coconut water. So I was like, oh, we should share the same flavor with him in coconut water. And then he does a great analogy of jiu-jitsu and coconut water and how they're very similar, which you wouldn't think. But once again, the amount of knowledge this guy has, and he was just like, yeah, coconut water and jiu-jitsu are very similar, and this is why. and it was great. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. I don't see how you guys couldn't. It's another fantastic episode. But before we let you go, a couple housekeeping things. Follow us on Instagram at Elbows Tight Pod. Like our Facebook page, Elbows Tight Podcast on Facebook. Go check out our website. Subscribe on YouTube, Elbows Tight Podcast on YouTube. We always put out a video with the podcast now. And then also, thank you to Crown Rash Guard for supplying us with fantastic rash guards and sponsoring this episode. So.
And now my rash guard fits better. So
did it shrink?
Better. I think I just lost a couple of pounds.
I don't think it did.
Whatever.
So thank you, Crown Rash Guard. If you guys haven't checked them out yet, crownrashguards.com. They are fantastic. I absolutely love it, and I couldn't be happier with them actually, hitting us up for this. They're phenomenal, and with the colored sleeve, the high quality, it's locally owned, single guy doing it all. You can't ask for much more, and they're very well priced. So make sure you guys go check them out and let them know that we sent you. So, but other than that, you got anything, John?
Nope, that's it.
Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoy this episode of Elbows Tight Podcast, and we will see you guys in the next one. Thanks, guys. Peace. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Elbows Tight Podcast. It's your host, Travis and John. John, how you doing today?
I'm doing exceptionally well today. I got some good exercise in.
Yeah, because you just trucked through the snow in Washington State. It's probably the deepest snow we've had in
a couple
2 years,
yeah,
2-3 years at least.
For sure.
Yeah. Usually we don't get very much snow here. So whenever we do, people will start seeing a single snowflake or a raindrop, and it's just all breaks. People just stop completely on the road.
That, and I mean, I already took 2 days off of work when I saw the forecast. Yeah. I was like, okay, I'm not going to come in Thursday, Friday. Monday's a holiday. Hopefully it'll melt by
I told the guys that in my office, I was like, you know what? If I see a single snowflake when I wake up, and not a millennial, like an actual snowflake falling, if I see a single one on Friday morning, I'm calling in. And there was still snow left over from on Thursday night, and it wasn't very much. I was like, I'm gonna go ahead and just call out. I'm not coming in risking it because our roads don't get hit right away. They usually take a day or two for them to come and dig us out when we do have heavy snow. So, but today we have a very special guest. We have Mr. Roy Dean. How you doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on, guys.
No problem. Thank you for giving us your time today. But before we get into the interview, Mr. Roy, what's your beverage of the day for today?
Beverage of the day is coconut water. I got the Harmless Harvest, which is kind of a tasty variety, but one of many. And it's good. I mean, there's nothing like a coconut water after training.
Yes. You put in we were emailing each other back and forth, and then last night you put in there, it was a good synonym or simile for jiu-jitsu, right? Can you go in a little bit of, you said a different flavor, but...
Yeah, right. So it's all coconut water. It's a kind of a distinct, branch of the beverage chain. But you have all these varieties. You have coconut water with mango or lime or pineapple added. You have, and maybe those are different, different systems of jiu-jitsu that have been, practiced by different people. Maybe the coconut water with mango is like 10th Planet. And, if you get the pulp, that's like part of the roots of where that came from. So maybe that's like the jiu-jitsu for MMA.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like it.
So, and you go everywhere. It's coconut water. It's delicious. It's good anywhere you go, however you get it. But, regionally, it could be different. And that's part of the fun, is like tasting these different flavors of the same thing. They're prepared a little bit differently. And, and you can even look at the family of jiu-jitsu like that. Like judo is jiu-jitsu, Aikido, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, some of the older Koryu traditions, Japanese traditions where they have a lot of, they retain some of the weapon stuff. So, it's jiu-jitsu is varied, but, I think that's one of the best parts of it.
Yeah. We actually, my wife and I enjoy coconut water, and so John and I ended up buying a couple coconut waters to join you in on it. And I got the pineapple one. So
he got flavored. He gave me original. I can't say I'm a
the
fan
Vita
of the
Coco is
original.
good. I've definitely had that one.
He's like, oh, this one's kind of rough. I was like, you want to try the coconut pineapple? So, but hey, before we go any further, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to the people who might not know who you are, the very few out there that might not know who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Roy Dean. I am a lifelong martial artist. I started training when I was 16 in Japan. I was doing judo over there as an exchange student. And going to Japan changed the trajectory of my life. That involvement with martial arts got me into other forms of jiu-jitsu. I did Aikido, traditional Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, and then once I got involved in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it was a really deep love affair. It's a challenging art, and that's one of the things that I liked about it so much. So, been training about 30 years altogether, and maybe 16 in BJJ, and it's something that's changed my life, and I'm very grateful to the art. I'm currently a 3rd degree black belt under Professor Roy Harris.
Yeah. So, what was the first martial art that you actually did? Was it in Japan?
So I did a little karate when I was a kid. I got enrolled, but I wasn't like developmentally, I wasn't there yet. I didn't really understand what I was doing. I was probably 9 or 10. And then when I got chosen as an exchange student to Japan, they wanted me to do a traditional martial art or traditional Japanese art after school. And I didn't want to do flower arranging or like archery. I wanted to do something, kind of make me a man, right? So I asked to do judo, and they said, oh, it's very tough training. I was like, no, I'm ready for it. So I did that for about a year and then came back to the US, but it was very, very formative. It really kind of popped that bubble of like Asian mysticism about martial arts. I mean, judo is about a lot of repetitions and then putting it into action and, full commitment to the throw too. You have to be able to and the perfection in the technique is not in doing a perfect, it's doing it without thought and like matching the moment through your movement. So it was a great martial art to start with, and it gave me a great base to go and explore some of these more, sometimes more esoteric arts. Like Aikido has a more spiritual bent, and they've eliminated a lot of techniques from their technical curriculum. So you just focus on these essential things and try to get a better understanding there. So I'm really grateful that I had that time doing judo. You just like BJJ, you find out the truth real quick.
I read your book, The Martial Apprentice, probably a couple years ago, and it was at a good time because me and Travis were actually in Japan. So we were there working, but we were also training jiu-jitsu in Yokosuka. So it was just interesting because I was reading your book at that time and getting your perspective of Japanese culture and being down there. So that to me, that was like really unique. And I think that's when we really started following your content, subscribing to your channel. I think we do our own private practices on Sunday by watching you and Roy Harris. I can't remember, we were watching a lot of
one.
Yeah. And then we'd go practice that on Sundays pretty extensively.
Yeah, we actually would have the iPad on the mat on base. And then we would sit there and we would watch the technique and it'd be like, okay, now we could practice. And we would practice it and we're like, something doesn't feel right. We would rewind it. And then it was like we were in a seminar, like a private seminar.
But our first experience was with some judo people there. They wanted to work on their ground game. They didn't speak English, and but they would come to the gym on, I think it was a Sunday.
Sunday was open.
They had like the international Japanese judo team there. So that was like our first taste of it. And I was like, well, I've never done judo. So I'm like immediately pulling guard. So I was like, I didn't know what was going to happen here.
Yeah, it was crazy to sit there with them because it was literally, 10, 12 judo black belts and like world champs and whatnot. And that the first thing I was like, do you want to like stand up? Like, I really don't want to get thrown right now. But he's like, no, I want to do jujitsu. And I was like, I'm literally been doing this for like 6 months, man. Yeah. But I guess we can go ahead.
That's fantastic. There's nothing quite like, I'm a big believer in cross training with other, and it could be jujitsu and sambo, could be jujitsu and Aikido, or another catch wrestling too. I think especially as you get more advanced, you need to know what these other grappling arts do, which is kind of outside the norm of the general jiu-jitsu game. Like I remember going with a catch wrestler and he did this inside heel hook. I had butterfly guard. He reached down in between and then just cranked on. He was a big guy. And I was like, oh, I need to remember that. And you would never get that in like a normal jiu-jitsu, some of the attacks. So I think it's so illuminating to be able to cross train with other people, you know, outside of your school or maybe in different art.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually listening to your book. The other one, we were trying to listen to the same one, but we ended up picking two of the different books. But I'm becoming a black belt, and we both come from a CrossFit background before we started jiu-jitsu. And I thought it was so interesting that you started CrossFit in the early 2000s in the same school as Greg Glassman, right?
So I wasn't doing the CrossFit classes myself, but Greg Glassman taught because I was living in Monterey, and then he was sharing space with Claudio Franza up in Santa Cruz. And Claudio and a guy named Garth Taylor were like the first BJJ athletes to be sponsored by CrossFit and to be, and so I got exposed to it and I started learning more. And CrossFit was like different back then. It was more almost theoretical. What if we take this bunch of exercises and these movements from these disciplines and cross-train them? And I think it was, you know, a revolution, a fitness revolution, which I think is great. But then it's like all things that morphed into something else. But you know, CrossFit is, I think it's been overall good for the fitness industry, and it shook things up. And the entire, you know, I mean, there's a lot of similarities between CrossFit and Jiu-Jitsu. It's kind of a sense of community. There's an intensity there that people crave. And why do people really want, of course, people want to be in shape because they want to feel better and be more attractive or whatever, have an enhanced sense of well-being. But a lot of it is just like that intense feeling of being alive that you get at the end of one of those workouts or at the end of a sparring session. You know, there's also an element of not total randomness, but variation, which is there's a repetition but variation, which is very pleasing to the mind, where you have these core exercises, but you don't know how they're going to be combined, or you don't know what's going to be taught in class that day, and you don't know how your partner is going to attack you, but you know you have your familiar game. And so that mix is just so delicious.
Yeah, absolutely. I try to tell people that do CrossFit that talk about coming over to jiu-jitsu. I'm like, dude, you'll fall in love with it because it's the same thing, sense of community. And then I thought I was pretty fit before doing jiu-jitsu. And then I rolled for my first 5 minutes and I looked at my friend. I think it was John. I was like, I would die in the streets. Like I would literally be dead in the streets.
Yeah, that was a quick lesson learned.
Yeah.
I was like, man, I thought I was like tough.
So how often do you actually get to train now?
Oh, I probably train 3 days a week, 3 days a week, sometimes 4 if I'm feeling it. But I'm very much into like balancing. So I'll do yoga maybe 2 times a week. Ashtanga yoga. I'm a big advocate of Ashtanga. And then I'll do, you know, like calisthenics, kettlebell pull-ups, body weight squat, that kind of thing. Occasionally I'll dabble. I did like a little powerlifting stint a little while ago to kind of, you reawaken things when you do that. But, you know, I just like mixing it up, or maybe going for like an extended walk. Randy Couture used to call it like active rest, where it's not too intense, but you know, you're just kind of, I just want to keep moving. I'm 46. I've trained a lot. I still love it, but you have to keep your instrument pretty well honed if you're going to be going against, you know, really skilled people or just giants of any nature, you know?
Yeah, John, you can relate to that, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I find myself, we were talking a little bit earlier, you know, 3 years into this jiu-jitsu journey, and I started right when I was turning 40. So a lot of the guys I'll practice with or whatnot, you know, they're 20s, pretty fresh. And I'm like, man, I'm trying to find this balance on you know, like how to spar with someone that's vastly, I don't want to say, well, they're younger, they're more energetic, they seem to recover quicker. But yeah, that's just one of the things I'm just trying to figure out now, because I'm still competitive, you know, and I don't. You know,
of course, you wouldn't be in the art really if you didn't have some level of competitiveness in you.
He
For
uses
sure.
wrist locks to neutralize.
I do use a lot of wrist locks. It seems to help when they're just so energetic and they're going nonstop, and it's a good way I slow them down.
The unguarded gait is best to attack.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
How do you deal with do you get to roll with younger people a lot? Or
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm still super active. The so you have to amass a certain amount of technique before you can implement strategy. But you know, the strategy for a lot of those younger guys, you can't match their pace.
right.
You can't match their pace. So what you have to do is you either have to slow them down or lure them to a position where you don't have to move that much. Like you can let them pass your guard or almost pass your guard or take half guard or something like that in a position where, you know, it's a lot easier when, like, if you're on the ground and they're standing up and they're going all fast and they're trying to like juke you, you're like, do your thing. I'm waiting here. It's not about racing that guy. It's about like, he's going to turn that corner and you just know a shortcut and you're waiting at that corner. Right. So when he's like, how'd you get here so fast? You're like, eh.
That's a
I've been
great
down
way
this
to
road.
put it. That's such
Very
a good way
true.
to put it. So you said that you are a black belt under Roy Harris, and in your books you talk about how instrumental he was and who you became today and your martial arts background and whatnot. Is there anyone else that you look up to in martial arts that you would hold in the same regard as Roy Harris?
Oh, you know, Mr. Harris is a high quality individual and technically like really phenomenal, you know, and he was one of the early people that embraced cross training and kind of JKD mindset. So, you know, there are a lot of people I admire in the jiu-jitsu community. I think Pedro Sauer is like, dude, the vibe off him is just, I've been to many of his seminars, a gentleman, technically amazing. His understanding of biomechanics and everything is just superb. You know, and there's a lot of people that I've admired technically. Years ago, I heard an interview with a black belt, and he was like, you know, his name was Tyrone Glover. He was kind of like an influential black belt here on the West Coast in the early days. A friend of Jeff Glover's, same team, but they're different people. And he's like, you know, you got to become a fan. You have to be, if you really want to get good at jiu-jitsu, you have to fall in love with the art and you have to become a fan of somebody. And then you start emulating things from them. And I would say over the years, I've been a big fan of like David and Daniel Camarillo, the Camarillo brothers. Their integration of judo and jiu-jitsu was dynamic and deadly. Guys like Jacques Ray, dude, I loved watching any tournament footage of him. His timing, his aggression, you know, but it's aggression, but it's not wasted energy. He'll explode and then he's able to save energy because he's so aggressive. Boom, he tips a guy over and then he's attacking. Guys like Andre Galvao, I mean, he's the greatest Brazilian competitor of like my generation, and the greatest American competitor, Rafael Lovato Jr. And even though I'm not like heavily embedded in the competition scene, I do have a lot of respect for those guys because they've been willing to do it, you know, travel, do the training, do whatever it takes to achieve their goals. And so there's a lot of people, you can admire people from a technical standpoint, as far as like their competition record and their medal. And then people, you know, you admire more on I would say like intellectual level, like Danaher, like Mr. Harris, and Pedro Sauer I would put in that same category.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. That was, when you talk about like Mr. Harris and your book and everything like that, it's really like inspiring that you get to engage with someone and that had such influence, like you talked about, like in your book from him. And when you started jiu-jitsu, you talked about how you had multiple black belts in other martial arts before you even started jiu-jitsu. And I was laughing listening to your when you competed in white belt and blue belt. And you're like, man, I have black belt in judo. I have a black belt in this. And like, I'm getting my butt kicked right now. Like, this is infuriating.
It shouldn't be, but it's happening anyway.
And so my next question is, you have 4 different black belts, right? You said.
Uh-huh.
And which one was probably the most difficult to obtain? And not only necessarily like physically, but Because I know into the traditional martial arts, you have other aspects that you have to go through. Which one of them was the most difficult to obtain?
Oh, I mean, I mean, definitely the BJJ black belt is the most difficult to attain. I would say the judo black belt was actually not that difficult to attain because I was in a competition system. So I competed every month, and you have to beat a certain number of guys at each level, and then you go to the next level. And if you get good at a couple of techniques, you can kind of coast your way through to Shodan rank. And this is in high school, so it's different than like the standards that they would have in the United States for where they have you do like the entire syllabus of like the whatever 67 throws of the Kodokan and all that. This is like performance, meat and potatoes. And so I was able to, through my performance, be able to get my first degree black belt after a year. So, after in term, like I would say the Japanese Jiu-Jitsu black belt in Seibukan Jujutsu took a lot of like technical drilling and training, and it was not that easy. I mean, to really understand the art, because they make you do weapons too, and a variety of weapons. So you learn a boken, like a wooden sword, and they have you do like knife defense, gun defense. They're not all incredible defenses, but it's more about giving you ideas on angles to get off the line of attack in different ways. And another thing that they do is like, for example, in the black belt test with Seibukan, he attacked you back in those days. He would attack you with a mystery weapon.
Oh, I remember you talking about that in your audiobook, and I was like, "That's
and you don't know." And a couple people got hurt doing that.
Oh.
Like they didn't get out of the way entirely. And there are some. It puts something into you. So I think there's, in terms of the energy output and focus, the Seibukan Jujutsu third degree black belt in that took a lot of time and dedication, but nothing really compares to the BJJ black belt. I mean, dude, because you have to do it through competition. You have to do it to your own instructor standards. And back in those days, like now the problems are different. The problem is really there's too much information and too many options, which I mean is kind of, but back in the day it was like too little information and not enough options. So now it's about cutting things away for additional clarity. And back then it was just like being a sponge and absorbing info.
There is a lot of content out there now. Like you can definitely get lost in trying to research and trying to learn. Like I've tried all kinds of stuff. I won't lie. In the last 3 years, I'm like the BJJ flow maps. I've tried those, to try to give a little structure. I'll try whatever. But some things work.
And I think different approaches are, someone's approach might really resonate with you. Some people go more conceptual. Some people go more technical. Here's the exact syllabus that you need to do. Here's, Mr. Harris's approach was fundamental movements into positional escapes. That's the real foundation. And then the techniques build easily off of that. So, I mean, there's, one of my black belts now, he wanted to do some kind of weird, I wouldn't say weird, but it was like a really advanced thing, maybe some deep half. And I was like, dude, only study those areas when you find yourself in them. If you find yourself in there, then it'll give you answers, but those answers are not applicable if you don't get near that problem. So, I mean, as a white belt or a blue belt, you can accumulate, and occasionally some things make all the difference in the world for you. But unless you find yourself like, oh man, I'm getting my guard pass, okay, then get a guard retention thing, or if you find yourself in deep half, but you don't have any options, that's when you go for that instructional. Otherwise, it's just clogging up your mind, man. It's too much. You want less options.
I totally agree. It reminds me, first time I ever got knee barred, I wasn't sure what was going on. I didn't know what that was. We were in Japan, and I was like, what is this guy doing to me? So like he did it, I think 4 times in a row, like really quick. And I just kept tapping. Yeah. Finally, I told him, was like, look, I'm gonna be honest, I have no idea what you're doing. So we can either you can change
Yes.
tactics, or I'm just gonna keep tapping to this.
Exactly.
What we're doing.
Totally. No, yeah. And dude, if I will ask, if somebody gets me with something, I don't get angry. I'm like, dude, that was good. What was that?
Yeah, for sure.
What was that? Because I'm stealing that. And that's the attitude you got to take.
Yeah. We were talking about like content and stuff. What made you decide to want to start putting out content on YouTube? Because you started doing YouTube at the very start of YouTube, right?
Early, I was just, I was being kind of creative, and I've always been into doing digital media. So, I grew up playing the piano, and then I went to school to become like an audio engineer, write music electronically. And then I got hired by a production company, and then I learned all about video editing, and I was like, oh man, I can do all this myself. And I thought, I had a couple of ideas. I said, one, I got to quit the 9-to-5 grind. I had to find a way out. And people from all over the world were coming to train with my instructor, and they had their own academies. And I was like, man, I could totally do this. And I love jiu-jitsu. I mean, I love martial arts. So I said, okay, this is the answer. And what's my competitive edge? Well, I'm an expert in media. And so once I started producing content, I released some stuff on YouTube that I wasn't going to be releasing otherwise. For example, with Blue Belt Requirements 1.0, the first round of filming I didn't like. There was a little sound from the lights overhead. I didn't like it. So I just put it out on YouTube. And then people were like, oh, this is great. I was putting out content for free, high quality content. So then I decided, okay, this is good. And communication is really about storytelling. So I thought, I'm going to do something a little bold here and risky, but sometimes that works out. And I started posting my belt promotion demos. And because I wanted to, it's like just tearing off your shirt, like, here are my standards.
Right.
Open for criticism. And also, the idea of me tapping to a white belt at the very end when they go against the big boss, like, people didn't understand how you're like working with them to like make them really dig deep, so they don't give up in that moment. But those are risks that you take, and totally fine. So people got involved with the storyline of my academy, and like, oh, these guys have really clean, fluid technique. Something's going on here. And so being able to share that with YouTube and just like, I just wanted to put out high quality content. And then I said, I'm doing something good. If I can just continue to put out content that puts jiu-jitsu in a really good light, so that even if people are exposed to it just they don't know anything about jiu-jitsu, but they come across like Peter's Crucible, like probably the most popular video I have. Yeah, or one of the other, black belt demos, like No Mercy for Old Men with Rick Ellis. Mm-hmm. Like those different ends of the spectrum. One is a young adult, the other guy is in his 50s, and they're both getting their black belts. And these are inspiring trials, rites of passage, and that's something deep. I think everyone who's involved in jiu-jitsu should read the book Tribe by Sebastian Junger. And he talks about how these guys go to war and they're in a very intense situation where they rely on each other. And it goes back to earlier days, where we were in tribes, and that reliance on the unit creates deep meaning in our lives. And plus a feeling of being alive, like you're on edge, as you guys know, if you were involved in the armed services. So like that, and then those guys, when they come back to regular civilian life, it's like not as exciting. Like they're missing something. And you can reconnect to your own tribe through jiu-jitsu, through CrossFit, through yoga. You need these other athletic endeavors. And if I can expose more people to that, that inspires me to do even better work, and keep moving forward with spreading jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I think that was our first exposure. Was obviously it was one of your belt tests on YouTube, and we were watching. I was like, man, I should probably demote myself beyond
Me
white
too.
belt.
I was like, I don't think I can do that. I was like, that is amazing.
Yeah, and they were like super high quality, and then obviously, like you just mentioned, the storyline was phenomenal because it starts off, they're just doing their technique with their partner, and I'm like, man, these guys are so smooth. Like it is incredible to watch, and then it gradually starts to intensify, and then the sparring starts, and they start off with someone of the similar belt or a belt above, and then they start building up in the difficulty, right? See, we pay attention to this.
Oh yeah.
And no, then, you guys, yeah,
then,
you guys are on it.
You end with you, right? And when I first started, I was like, I don't think I could ever tap a black belt. How are these guys tapping, Roy Dean in these videos? And then as I started getting more experience, I realized, oh, he was feeding him that arm bar. He was like, hey, here it is. Are you gonna?
Right.
Are you going for it? Like this is it. And I've noticed it from higher belts that I've rolled with too. If they want to see my skill, they start kind of feeding things to me, and if I start taking it or not, So.
Yeah, awesome, dude. Thanks for paying attention, guys. And that dynamic of the upper belt, or it's like lions. The big lion will just like, have the little lion attack, and it falls over. It plays, it goes into it. Same thing. I throw people when I'm training. I'm checking their awareness level. Hey, I'm reaching back between your legs here. Are you going to triangle me or what? Oh, you're not seeing that? I'm putting my forearm on your throat. You don't know which way to turn for the arm bar. You're not ready for your blue belt yet. It needs to be a little bit more automatic. So being able to just like feed that dynamic and have your ego check out, because initially with jiu-jitsu, it's like, no, this is like my identity. Am I gonna, it's simulated war, and you lost that battle, and your genetic, legacy is now cut off because you just got tapped by someone, right? Yeah. On some level, that's what we're working with, but we have to morph that into, we're playing around, and we're using the art to do other things like mood regulation, keep in shape, connect with other people, and get lost in the game. The problem solving skills that you get in jiu-jitsu allow you to like keep an open mind about things. I wish more politicians did jiu-jitsu, because it's all about, okay, that normally works, that should work. It didn't work. Let's look at a new approach. And there's no judgment. There's no moral judgment with like leaving one thing behind and going for another avenue. I think over in the UAE and they're doing jiu-jitsu in the educational system.
Mm-hmm.
Like we do high school wrestling here. They did judo like that in Japan. If they had jiu-jitsu or judo or, some of these other martial arts, if that were supported by our educational system, our public educational system, I think we'd have a more peaceful society.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I really thought about that. That would be interesting.
Yeah, one of our friends, he's going to school similarly for film and audio, and he was asking us to do, for his thesis, he's going to do a documentary on how in public violence is frowned upon, but the second you enter a school like a jiu-jitsu school or taekwondo or something like that, then violence is embraced, and how that affects you outside and inside, right? The two differences. And so he asked us to do an interview with him, and I'm like, man, that's a very thought-provoking idea, right? Like, I can't the second I leave these doors, me arm barring someone in the streets is kind of frowned upon, but I'm doing it inside the school, and it's everyone's on the same page. You know what I mean? So that's a very, very thought-provoking thing for me. Is like, man, maybe more people should do this. I mean, when you fall in love with something, you always try to get everyone to do it with you.
Right.
Like we're always like, come do jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I mean, we've tried to talk everyone we know into it.
Yeah, not everyone
roll their eyes when they look at it.
Not everyone's into it, but BJJ is, look, I call it a high art. It's challenging. You got to be physically adept. You don't need to be the strongest guy in the world, but you can't have any weak links in your chain. So you got to be strong enough in jiu-jitsu. You got to be flexible enough. You got to, you have to have strategy and technique and whatever. So there are all these things that if you're not there yet, you're not going to be as successful as you'd like to be in the art. Because I mean, dude, it's a real resistance, right? But there are other martial arts that I think might interest people a little more, like, say, Taekwondo, or like the Japanese Jiu-Jitsu style, Seibukan. Sometimes those are like, I call them feeder arts, where they get people in the door, they embrace like the entire ritual of going in and changing into a uniform and studying things and learning specific movements. You know, there's a difference between, I guess, many traditional martial arts where you're promoted on the replication of movements as opposed to your application of technique against resistance. I mean, those are two totally different bars. But just to get people to this low bar is better than nothing.
Yeah.
Agreed.
You know, and so it can be that way with, I happen to like Ashtanga yoga more than I like Bikram yoga. It doesn't mean that I hate Bikram yoga. And Bikram was like the first time I ever got the yoga high. So I love Bikram yoga or hot yoga these days, because it gives you that yoga high and you don't need to like practice for a year so you memorize the sequence so you can focus on your breath instead of, oh, which pose comes next. Right? They take all that out, they crank the heat up, you feel wrung out by the end of class, and you're like, I feel amazing. So, you know, to be able to get people in the door, and then if they want like a higher approximation of truth in terms of physical combat, then they can gravitate toward the BJJ.
Yeah. So when you do your video content, going back to that real quick, like we keep saying, it's very high quality. If people haven't watched it yet, please go watch a video. You'll be amazed on the quality of this content. What's your equipment that you actually use for the videos?
Good question. A couple of different things. I'm usually a Sony guy, so I've had a variety of Sony like 4K camcorders that I've used. I just got a new Sony, I think it's an A7S III, which is a, you know, more a DSLR camera, but I want to do some really great content with that. That's like this coming year. I got some cool projects coming up. It does amazing slow-mo. I also have used the DJI Osmo Pocket to do pure rolling 2. So with that was recording at 60 frames per second, and it's buttery smooth. And so for the slow-mo and that, I usually use Sony cameras, and I try to get the audio good. That's a very important element.
Absolutely.
And I try to have dynamic camera guys. Like I do a variety of projects. So I did I've done a lot of instructionals that are real super clean, like no one else is on the mat. And then I wanted to go in the opposite direction. So I started doing Coachella, which was like fly on the wall. This is real life, nothing scripted, no special microphones or anything. This is just like, this is what it is. And it was a kind of a juicy snapshot of the dojo at that time, which I liked. And now I'm kind of doing things in the middle where it's real life. For example, I'm working on a new project called the Jiu-Jitsu class, Volume 1. And these are real classes that I've taught for the people in the room. And you see them in the background, you see bags in the background, whatever. But the camera work is awesome because the guy's he's getting in there. It's very different than just being on a tripod, right, standing back. No, you feel it's immersive. And it's the real stuff that these people need to know, which is a different setup than the way most instructionals are. They go usually really, 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 really deep in one particular subject matter, you know, but this is more of like linking words together into sentences and saying like, hey, you could say this or you could say that, you know? So anyways, I'm working on the artwork with Peter Hulse right now. Peter, my black belt.
Oh, okay.
And he's also a graphic designer. So we've been working on that PDF download. Every time I do a project, I want to be better than the last one, right? You know, I want to be beautiful. I want to be great content. and that in turn gets more people involved in the art.
Absolutely. I'm a Sony guy too. This is the camera that we use is a Sony A6100 with a Sigma 16 millimeter on the end of it, right? So good glass in front of a good body too, which is
Totally
great. And it's funny that you mentioned that because John is not a tech guy.
I'm like, thank God your stuff's so easy for me to get to on Apple. It's just like, boom, done. All my videos are there. Download. That's why I like it.
But like this whole setup, like I have a vision in my mind of what I want our podcast to look like and sound like, and obviously audio is always the first thing that we need to worry about and how good the audio is. But then I was like, you know what? I think we can branch out and start doing different styles of content and do like a video podcast with it too. And so I invested in a decent camera. And next thing we want to do is I told him, I was like, we should do like instructional videos, like blue belts teaching, white belts. Like we were just there, like these are the things we kind of look like. And these are the kind of things that helped us out, kind of give that little bit more raw, because I don't know, I feel like we can get a better connection with people. Not saying the black belt can't, right? But it's kind of like listening to someone that's been there with you. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, hey, bro, I literally just did this last week. I promise you. Like,
So. Yeah, no doubt. And some of the problems are fresh from that level. Black belt, upper black belt. It's been a while since they've had those problems with the same kind of intensity. And the problems shift. A lot of people don't realize that. Oh, it's not just, you don't just train the same way going up all the way to black belt. You have to change the way you train and focus on different things. It's really important that you can kind of, just adapt as you continue to go on. And people that were just in those trenches, they remember, oh man, this is what you really need to do.
Yeah, I think a big thing we always talk about right now, at least at our level and talking to our friends, is the whole strength versus technique and technique versus strength, and where you're at with, where you're at in your at your game at that point. And I think for us right now, I'd say we're about like 50-50, right?
Yeah.
Like, when we first started, it was all strength, like 100% for sure. And we would search for content, looking for something where somebody's talking about that when we were like in that first year, like, are we going too hard, or like what are we doing here? And that's really just thinking about those things is what started our podcast. Is there was nowhere for us to really go and hear people in the trenches at that moment talking about it.
No doubt.
That's what we were really looking for. But I like listening to you talk about it, and strength versus technique, and when you should use them, or sometimes like if you don't have quite the technique, like 3 years in, I can assure you I don't have all the technique locked down. So I'm using a whole lot more strength when I need to, especially when, if it's a 20-year-old, I'm using probably a whole lot more strength than I normally would with someone that might be more experienced, that has more technique. And it's, it's easier for me to match that than just pure muscle.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's like a continuum. You start out using like 80% strength, 20% technique, but as you like really dial into what those angles are, it gets higher and higher. And then it's like, oh, I'm using like 70% technique, 30% strength. And the high level black belts are in the 90s, almost always. Sometimes you actually, your physical attributes decrease because you're so used to just like, oh, I'm just going to play my position, pick this guy off. And so when you actually get taxed, you're like, shoot, I'm not really in as good a shape as I used to be. This is terrible, which is a different kind of challenge for upper belts. Now I'm good, but I'm out of shape.
Yeah. And all I'm seeing is like, man, I wish I had their technique.
Right? I know. You think all your problems will be gone. You got different problems.
All right. It's like, he's not even breathing hard. Look at that. I'm over here dying.
So like you just mentioned, you having to change your technique and whatnot. How do you prevent injuries, or how easily do you get injured now when you train?
Well, if I don't warm up at all, I could warm up through. If I don't warm up at all, it's easy to get injured. If I do a thorough warm up, still in the first round or two, I won't go with like the most challenging guy. I try to go with someone who's like maybe another black belt and will flow, and there's still pressure and it's still somewhat real. And, it usually ramps up during the roll and it goes down, the tempo shift. But when it comes to like those first two rolls, I will probably not get injured if I have a good first two rolls. I'm not going to go all the way. I'm not going to redline it on the first round or the second round. Third round, okay, we're good. We're good. But you know, I need at least 10 to 15 minutes of rolling before I'm gonna really go against that, you know, that 240-pound black belt who's just a beast. You know, I'll do it. It's cool. And it's good for me to do that, but I know better. I've taught myself. And I don't get exhausted anymore. If I'm like, oh, that was good. I did 5 rounds, maybe 6. We're good. Don't get exhausted and then strain too much at the very end. That also prevents injuries.
Yeah, John, how do you kind of prevent? Because I know you've had a couple more than I have.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I don't know. I think sometimes I'm just going too hard. And I think you said I get exhausted, but I just keep pushing through it. And, you know, sometimes I'll even take off the gi and I'm like, I'm done. And then somebody will be like, one more roll, go back on, and I'll do it. And I'm like,
hard to turn it down once you're warmed up.
I'm like, oh, I just shouldn't have. But, you know, I laid off the weights for a while. I'm trying to get back into weight training, seeing if that'll help prevent some injuries. And you know, we'll see. I do prefer to warm up. Not too long of a warm up. I like maybe 10 minutes tops, but
all good.
Then I'm pretty much ready to go after that.
Yeah.
So what lessons would you tell the younger self that you've learned on your way through your journey in jiu-jitsu?
Wait, are you saying what would Professor tell himself when he was 16?
Yeah.
All the knowledge he's amassed now, what would he tell himself?
Yeah.
Tap early, tap often. No one's watching. And when I say no one's watching, I mean, like, sometimes when you're in a role, you think you're performing for the people that are watching on the side, or the people in the crowd that are watching, or the person you're pushing against is watching. Like, nobody's watching. No one is observing your role. This is just between you and that other person. And, you know, I would say keep your head down, keep showing up. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And just, yeah, I would also have to, I guess, end that with, it's all about longevity. It's all about longevity. So all of your physical training should embrace that. I've known CrossFit athletes and powerlifters and yogis and all kinds of, whenever you start going to those extremes with your kind of physical capabilities, Dr. Mark Chang says something great. You know, movement is like money. It's not a big deal and you can spend it if you have it. But if you're getting it on credit, you can't do that for very long. Right. And I've seen a lot of like power lifters, they just pay the price. Their shoulders go, their thumb goes. They get a stiffness or whatever, or, you know, CrossFit people, there's a lot of shoulder injuries.
Oh,
there.
man.
Yeah. Right. Yogis, you don't want to go into hypermobility either, you know? Whatever, just stay the middle path and aim for longevity. I think that's, and I've been trying to just chip away at that middle path for a long time. And that's the kind of jiu-jitsu I try to give my students too. Like, it can be applicable to MMA or competition jiu-jitsu, or just whatever, health and fitness, or your own personal, you know, figuring out the chess game. But you don't have to go to any one extreme and be pigeonholed there.
So when you look to promote your students, what, besides technique, or is it just purely technique that you're looking for them, the application of jiu-jitsu, or are you looking for kind of personality traits? Because I know in some schools, when a blue belt is just, you know, the first belt, but as you start getting higher up, you become leaders in the school. So they want to promote people that would be good leaders for the school. Is that something you look for also when you're promoting people?
That's a really good question. Because BJJ is a performance-based martial art, it is kind of about performance, movement, and technique, ultimately. However, if the personality doesn't and their behaviors don't represent the art, then I need to work with them or maybe even hold them back a little from that. I also take into consideration, like, okay, how old are they? What were they like when they started versus where they are now? Sometimes you can't compare people to, against the stud in the room, your normal average person against, someone who's a formerly high level athlete or collegiate wrestler or whatever. You have to compare them. Could that guy kick that guy's ass if he walked in? The guy from 3 years ago, would this guy be able to beat him up? Almost assuredly, it's yes. So you have to kind of compare people to where they were. And I have a litmus test for a couple of different things, like white to blue. Would you be able to defend yourself on the street? And I don't mean beat up the attacker. I mean, like, be able to negate the situation, maybe run. Or if, someone put you down, put their forearm on the throat, do you know which way to turn to get the arm lock? Even if you don't get the arm lock, you'll probably get them to break away from you and you can take off. So do you know the basics? Okay. Purple belt, are you tapping people? You got to be able to tap people through combinations of techniques. Okay. Brown belt, it's more about being is like a seasoned purple belt. Purple and brown are very, very close, but you've been able to, instead of just attacking, you kind of start drawing back and observing at brown belt what the common responses are. So you get really, really efficient. Like, oh, I'm on top half guard. He'll either do this or he'll do that. And you know that and you're ready for it. So it looks like so easy, almost like you're a mind reader when you're at that level. How do you know I was going to do that? Because I've been there like 100 times and you've only been there twice.
Right.
And then when at black belt, that's when, to your point, it really kicks in. Do I want this person representing me in my lineage? That's the big one. And so far, everyone I've promoted black belt, I'm very, very pleased with who they are as individuals and their technical levels. So it is a consideration, but not the only one.
How many people have you promoted to black belt so far?
Oh, not that many. I think I'm at 8 or 9 so far, and I had a couple waiting. I have 3 guys that are waiting in the wings, but because of COVID, yeah. So in 2020, I was supposed to promote my guy in Russia, which I did online, which I thought was cool. I didn't want to make that the norm, but I was like, there's an opportunity to do something cool and different. And then my guy Caesar and another guy Hardy. Hardy's been a brown belt for like 8 years or 9 years. Like, okay, it's time, but the pandemic, cut all that down. And so I've been checking in with them, and they're like, no, I need more time now because, I'm not training as much, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's still a pretty high bar in my organization. And and it's an honor to be able to promote. I mean, when I started as a white belt blue, I couldn't imagine being a black belt. It was like the skill level was so high. And now to be able to help pass that on, thanks to the great instruction that I received from my teacher, I'm able to pass that on and pass it on to more people around the world. It's good. And that's one reason why I really have dedicated my life to jiu-jitsu. It's because it's part of the answer. It's not the entire answer, but it's definitely part of the answer to making us a healthier society.
Yeah, I agree. We both of our kids are in it as well. And I have 2 daughters that are in it, and they've been in it probably close to 2 or 3 years with me.
Yeah, about the same time as this.
But I can even see them change from when they started it. Like my youngest, she was almost 6 when she started it, and it was interesting because I'd see her in class. She was learning all the techniques, learning everything they taught, and me and her did a competition together. And I've got some pictures of her in this competition where, you could see the determination on her face. And it was like a game changer for her, that competition. Her game just changed from going, because I think she still has a lot of fun, but it was always fun and learning. She did a competition, and now it's even a little more serious to her. So I can see the difference, and I can see the confidence it puts in both my girls. So I really like it.
Yeah, our son, my son is 12 years old, and when he first started, he was probably about 10, 11, right? We've been doing about 2 years now. And he was a very introverted kid. He would get into class and he wouldn't want to like touch people or have people in his bubble or anything like that. And I'm like, look, man, this is for you, because kids are jerks. I was like, and there might be a time when some kid tries to think he's bigger and badder than you, and then you're gonna show him that you don't want to be messed with, right? So it's like that confidence that you'll be able to defend yourself also. But in the last 2 years, it's completely different. He's like a whole different kid now. It's crazy. I absolutely love it. He steps on the mat. Before he goes on the mat, he'll be like, do you think I should go easy on the kids today, or should I try a little bit harder? I'm like, look, bro, like, I think you should go as hard as you think you should go. Don't ask me. You know what I mean? Like, but it's great to watch. Absolutely love watching the transition to being a more confident young man, and how jiu-jitsu has, really changed his mindset on being a leader, holding himself accountable and whatnot. I absolutely love it. Do you get to teach a lot of kids, or is that
never? Yeah, no, I have taught kids before, and the energy is good and it's infectious. It's like, but no, I never teach the kids. I'm just adults. But that kind of transformative nature of what it does for them, especially at that age, like 8. I'm not a child development specialist, but like 8 to 12, you get them involved in that, and there's like a fluidity to their technique that is really difficult to match. And Peter Hulse, I think he started when he was, I don't know, 10 or 12 or something like that, and I had to promote him when he was 16, he got his blue belt, and I really wanted to hold him back, but by the time he was 17, I had to give him his purple.
Wow.
And then I couldn't hold him back. It was just too good, too fluid, too smooth. And some people they just take to it. And that confidence to be able to stand up for themselves or stand up for one of their friends, and it radiates when you really can do something. You're not trying to bluff. I've known a lot of bouncers, actually, that were just big guys, and they would kind of act crazy or like aggressive, like at that moment where they had to fight.
Right.
And the guy would get, whatever. But you can fly under the radar and be able to do whatever you need to do. I mean, there's a real confidence, and people sense it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's not only for myself, but it's funny having a podcast and being able to talk to people about jiu-jitsu and like what it's done for them. We had Jason Khalipa on a couple weeks ago, and he's like one of the CrossFit games in 2008, huge into CrossFit, big athletic guy, and he did Muay Thai for a little bit. But he's like, it sounds kind of vain, but I want to be the hardest person to kick their butt in the room. Like, that's kind of like why I do it, because I want to be able to defend my family if it comes down to it. I don't want to be able to easily get taken out of it, kind of mindset. And I was like, well, it's true, man. Like, I feel my wife has more confidence with being around me now. That we can go out, and I might not be able to beat the guy up, but I'm definitely way more strapped.
No, you have, but really by like blue belt, you have everything you need to defend yourself. And the basic, when it comes down to real conflict, it's basic angles, basic movements, and yeah, she picks up on your own confidence, which makes her more relaxed. And, and I've gained a lot of confidence over the years, just from my own involvement in the art. And people are like, I had a girlfriend say I had like pathological confidence when she first met me, because it's true. You're so much more capable than people suspect than you are. And, and you can apply that to other things. Like, you take the lessons of jiu-jitsu, like, if I stack circumstances right on top of each other, then you can achieve really incredible things. Like if the guy's coming at you in just the right way and you're out off the line of attack in just the right way, and then you sweep him in just the right moment. Dude, he's a big guy, but you totally flipped him. Well, was it all you? It wasn't all you.
Right.
It's you positioning yourself just right. And you can do that in business. You can do that in relationships. You can do that with conflict. And it's not about marshaling all your force against their force. It's about conserving energy by positioning yourself appropriately.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it, is because I feel like people get the blue belt blues, right? And we had it a little bit, obviously. And when we got our blue belts, like, we were kind of big into the self-defense part of it when we first started. Like, we didn't really have our mindset on competing. It was kind of like, oh, I kind of want to do this to defend myself. And then we got the blue belt, and we're like, well, that's pretty much self-defense. So now we got to learn more of jiu-jitsu to like advance.
Yeah, it was a mental shift, because I have people ask me all the time. They're like, I was like, well, honestly, I think you learn everything you need to know for self-defense, like on the street with someone that has no martial arts training, in probably 6 to 8 months. I said, I felt like once you get moved past that self-defense, really you're doing it because you love it. You're trying to stay in shape, but now you're just trying to beat other jiu-jitsu practitioners. And that's where it really goes after that self-defense. I mean, really just trying to beat that other the other jiu-jitsu guy, like,
Totally. Yeah. It's like you versus an uneducated audience, and then it's you versus a very educated audience.
Right.
And then which can lead into like weird, like wormholes of techniques and positions that would never really happen.
Right.
Or are very, very unlikely to happen. So you can have really sophisticated answers for problems that don't exist.
Right.
In real life. But in this particular set, those problems do exist. And, you're going to solve them. And that's part of the joy. I mean, initially, a lot of people come into jiu-jitsu because of self-defense, or maybe they were attacked, and they want to gain that confidence back, or what to do. But that fades after like you said, 8 months. Yeah, for sure. Or maybe even by 2 years, that should probably be just totally out of their minds. Then it's more about the game, and then after the game, you kind of figure out the game. I mean, you can be kind of a perfectionist like me, where I'm trying to find out the answers to, beat people with all different body types, all different games, all different, I want to be able to figure that stuff out. But that's only for me. I mean, it's only for me.
Right.
It's just a further refinement. But then once you get the game and the strategy, then it's about community. It's about connecting with people. It's about seeing your friends. It's about regulating your mood. It's about being able to just like take it as hard as you want to that day. Maybe it's not a high intensity day. Maybe you want to, everyone's there. It's 5 days a week, but you can't do the high intensity every day. So you do light intensity, but more frequency. So you can like change it to suit your needs. And there's really something to be said. A lot of people, just going back to like the powerlifting or the really elite athletes that sacrifice their bodies for the performance. There's something about, again, just going to that middle path. You're going to enjoy it longer, and you're going to get more output from the art. You don't want to become a slave to the art. You want the art to serve you. You don't want to serve the art. I mean, you do in a way, but you don't want to become a slave to the art. Yeah, this is a technology and a tool for you to improve your life.
Be spot on with that. I think that's like the balance. We talk about it all the time. Like, work, training, kids, life. We're trying to find that balance right now. And sometimes drawing a hard line. Like, we're only going 3 times this week. Like, not going and trying to go as much as you can to every class that's available. I think you're spot on with that. And once we tend to get into that habit of finding that balance, it's much more enjoyable.
Absolutely. I've taken a step back from doing jiu-jitsu as much, especially once we got our blue belt. I felt like when we were white belts, it was like go, 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 as much jiu-jitsu as possible. Learn everything I possibly can. YouTube it, Instagram. You know what I mean? Just trying to soak up as much as possible. And now I'm like, well, I'm going to go 2 times a week, open mat, enjoy it and get to roll with the newer people, try to teach a little bit of what I know. And I enjoy jiu-jitsu so much more now. Like, I don't feel like it's taxing me as much mentally or physically. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, all right, I get to go to jiu-jitsu today. Not I have to go to jiu-jitsu today. Like, I get to go to jiu-jitsu. I get to do this today. And it's honestly, that mental shift has been phenomenal. I mean, physically going through something as hard as, 3, 4, 5 minute rolls or 5 times is like, you leave with that high. You talk about that yoga high. You leave with those endorphins and you're like, oh man. Well, I'm not going to do that for 3, 4 days, but it was great right now. So.
Yeah. Well, hey, I mean, blue belt blues are a real thing. And a lot of people quit at blue. It's a sprint from white to blue for sure. And then if you don't kind of like, oh, I need to like stride it out, open up that stride, pace it out. Then if you keep that sprint mentality, you can kind of burn out about halfway through the race to purple. You have to kind of take a step back, integrate it into your life a little bit more. So it's comfortable with your lifestyle, and then just chip away at it. And even though you don't feel like you're really progressing, you're like, no, I'm at a plateau. You are getting better, but those are like roots. That's like you planted a bulb and the roots they're coming up, but it hasn't flowered yet. You have to keep watering it. You have to, so it'll poke through. It's invisible progress for a while, but then once it breaks through, then you really start coming into your own. You've become actually a different machine. So keep chipping away. Don't get down with it.
So we always like to ask the guest, what would you've kind of alluded to quite a few tips to beginners or intermediate practitioners and whatnot. What would your one tip wholeheartedly be for someone that just started jiu-jitsu or a white belt with a little bit of experience, maybe a year into it or something like that? What would your tip to them be about jiu-jitsu?
Make friends with the ground. Make friends with the ground so that you can learn how to like snake move, for example, or shrimping. It's you working with the ground so you can eliminate friction, right? So you're flat on the ground, boom, you eliminate that friction. Then you move because you have fewer points in contact with the mat, right? So you know how to move your body in relation to the ground. And if you roll over and you're like tabletopping or something, like kicking your leg through and you're on all like hands and feet, like looking down, or you want to do a sit out or something like that, you need to get comfortable with that weight distribution into your hands, being able to switch your base comfortably. Make friends with the ground, because the ground is going to be your ally on the other side. You learn how to turn yourself into a vice. This side doesn't move. This side moves, right? So you pin the person, then you apply pressure, right? And being caught on the ground, you need to learn how to escape those positions, change the shape of your body. And then offensively, you know how to make different shapes with your body, use the forces of nature, gravity, to be able to drive down. And so making friends with the ground, it shouldn't be foreign. You should be able to plop on the ground, make yourself into a ball, make yourself into a square, make yourself into a triangle at any time. And once you know how to be kind of like flexible like that, then now you're just adding another person. It's more about your relationship with the ground, and another person is in there, as opposed to you battling another person.
That's a great way to look at it. Because I feel like a lot of people, when they first start, they don't understand shrimping or pressure or how to sink and put your weight on someone. And thinking about, it's a backboard and then you have to apply the pressure to the backboard. That's like, now I'm like thinking like, man, I'm going to start thinking that way myself, actually, because I don't know, that's just a different way to look at it for me. Because before it's like me trying to put my pressure on them instead of trying to put it on the, the ground behind them. So Well, I appreciate that. That's pretty good. So we don't want to keep it too much longer. Where can people find you on Instagram, YouTube, and whatnot?
Okay, you can check me out on Instagram, Roy Dean. RoyDean.tv is a website. You can go search for Roy Dean on YouTube. And, I go through phases of activity on social media. Sometimes I want to pull back. Sometimes I will new project, really put it out there. But yeah, follow me. I'm always trying to put out high quality content that inspires people. It's one thing the art's been very, very good to me. It's been really good to me. I feel fortunate that I don't know how many lifetimes it took for me to be in this position where I can do this full time, but I'm grateful for it. And I want to put it back out there so that if I wasn't me and if I was someone else and came across my materials, I would say, oh, this is a pathway for me to improve my life. So if you want to get in on that and understand the art a little bit deeper, feel free to reach out or contact me through any of those mediums.
Yeah, the website is fantastic. I can't say enough about it. The app is great. I literally can watch a Roy Dean video on my phone anytime I want. I'll be sitting in my truck waiting for something, and I'm like, I'm going to watch an armbar series.
100%.
Yeah, and it's just as high quality content as you'll find out in the public, and it's fantastic. I can't say enough about it. So, John, you got anything else?
I'm just going to ask you, think you'll ever do another brick and mortar training facility?
Oh, I really don't. I really do not. No, I think I'm past that. It was good, and I learned a lot. I mean, you learn when you're teaching every day. It's like training every day. Your teaching game goes up big time. But now, no, I'm focused on just my affiliates, and they have the brick and mortar schools, and I'm just trying to make it a really cool gentleman's club for them so that we get together, we have trips, we have really memorable experiences together. So that's where my focus is right now. But yeah, just like competition too. Like there was a time where I was competing. Now those days are over. I'm into a new phase.
Perfect.
Well, appreciate it, Mr. Dean, for coming on and giving us your time today. This is honestly right off the bucket list. It was incredible that you gave us this opportunity. So I can't thank you enough. And this was great. There's so much information. I can't wait to send this out there and have people listen to it. So thank you for that. And then, John, you got that? That's it?
That's it, man. Thank you. And I actually reached out to a couple of our friends that are black belts and wanted to know if they had any questions they wanted me to ask. All they wanted me to do was tell you thank you. They said when they started their jiu-jitsu journeys, it was your content that they were first following.
Yeah.
So it helped them on their path. So
yeah, it was incredible how many people actually know who you are when we told them. We put it out on social media, and I got like 4 or 5 messages from friends who were like, oh, I love his stuff. I was like, I didn't know that. So we greatly appreciate it, man. Know that it's obviously, that you're making a huge influence around in the jiu-jitsu community. So thanks for that. So, but without anything else, that is all we have for today. So thank you guys for watching and listening at home. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I know I did. And remember, no oil checks here. John?
I'm not saying it.
All right, guys. Oh, see you later.